Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about all the books that I read in May. Yes. We're talking about all the books that I read in May today. I read a total of 11 books in May and I had one DNF. So we'll start with the first book the one book that I DNF'd, which was Speak by Lori Hales Anderson. I just could not get into it. It's definitely catered towards a younger audience, and Luna, my dog just came in with a toy. So if you hear noises, I'm sorry. Also, don't mind my wet hair. I just washed it, so there's that. I just couldn't get into it, so I ended up DNFing it, and I will be donating it to my local Goodwill because I couldn't get into it. So there's that. Out of the 11 books that I did end up reading, I read one nonfiction / memoir. It was a memoir. Two like mystery. One of them is kind of like literary fiction plus mystery, but I grouped it with the mystery. 5 romances. It was a very romance heavy month for me. 2 literary fiction and then 1 fantasy. I only had 1 fantasy this month, which is kind of crazy because I'm normally a really big fantasy person, and I've already read multiple fantasy books this month so far, so definitely just what the problem about being a mood reader is. Sometimes some months are very one genre heavy, and one genre you normally read a lot of is not very prevalent, but that's okay. Out of the 11 books that I read, I only have 4 physical copies because a lot of the books that I read this month were either on my Kindle or my Libby app. Actually, let me grab my Kindle. I just grabbed my Kindle so that way when I'm talking about a book that I read on my Kindle, I can hold something up because I like to hold it. Also, my new Kindle case is adorable and I love her. But anyway, majority of the books that I read this month were either on my Kindle or listened to through my Libby app, so that is why I only have 4 physical copies of the books that I read this month. But let's just get into it. The first book that I read this month was The Love Haters by Catherine Center. I actually got an early copy of this one, so I read it before it came out. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. It's my second Catherine Center book, and I really enjoyed it. At first, I wasn't 100% if I was going to like it or not because the main character very heavily at the very beginning talks about how she does not like her body at all, and it was kind of almost like triggering to a point, or just like, why do we keep bringing it up type thing. But towards the end it comes like full circle moment, and I really enjoyed that part about it. And I also really enjoyed the storyline. The female main character works with like documentary style things, and she does these like day in the lives with people, and her company that she works for is doing major cuts, and one of her coworkers gives her this job that will basically save her career. He gives it to her because it's working with this coworker's brother, and coworker and said brother don't have a very good relationship, so the coworker didn't want to do it, so he gave it to this girl. His brother, who the job is centered around, is a rescue diver. He will go into helicopters and like dive into the ocean and save people and dogs and stuff from drowning, and so it's about him, and just the dynamic of the 2 main characters was really cute. The male main character has a really cute dog, and I loved the dog, and the male main character just made me laugh, so it was cute. But go in definitely knowing that at the beginning specifically there is lots of talk about body image issues. The second book that I read last month was Magnolia Parks. I have heard so many people talk about this series, so I had to give it a try and see what it was about. And I will say, I honestly didn't enjoy this one as much as I thought I was going to. I went into this thinking that it could be a 5-star read for me. I ended up giving it 4 stars, so I still really enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I still really enjoyed it, but it just wasn't exactly what I was expecting. The characters in this are very toxic, which I did go in knowing that it was toxic relationships, but I don't know. It wasn't as amazing as I thought it was going to be. I was definitely hooked from the very beginning, and it was one of the things that like made me think that it was going to be a 5-star read, because at the beginning there is like a prologue almost, and it says, how many loves do you get in a lifetime? How many people do you get to call yours? There are all sorts of loves in this world, not all of them, but most of them are beautiful. Some are old, some noble, some brave. Others are dishonorable and weak and make you so by association. Some are a low whisper on a somber night. Some are maddening. Some you can't ignore. They slow burn inside of you, never quite going out completely, but you're too scared to dare try to fan that flame. Some loves you pretend you don't feel, even when you can, even when you know you do, even if he's the first thing you think of in the morning, even if he's still a match in the darkened room of your heart. Because loving something how you love him is a painful love that puts rocks in your pockets and melancholy in your eyeballs. And if time has taught you anything, it's that it doesn't matter. You'll love him forever anyway. That just immediately caught my attention, and I felt like I was going to love the book, and then it just didn't live up to the expectation I had put in my head. But I am still excited to continue the series and see where the rest of it goes, and maybe the series overall will be a 5-star or a favorite series, but just the first one's not my favorite, which is how a lot of series go. You know, you're not going to have not every book in a series it will be a 5-star book, even if the series overall is 5 stars. So I'm excited to see how the rest of this series goes. Hopefully I will get to it sometime soon. And then I listened to All the Colors of the Dark. This was my book club's pick for my family book club, and I enjoyed it. It was a 3.5 star. It was a mystery, and it was really interesting, and I wanted to know what happened, but it was so long. It felt like I was listening to it, and I felt like the story was wrapping up, and then there was still like 6 hours left in the audiobook, and I was like, what the heck is going to happen in these next 6 hours? Because I thought the story was ending. Basically, this one follows 2 characters. One of them gets like kidnapped when he's young, and then the other one is his best friend, and she is basically trying to find him. That part of the story wraps up, and then you continue on while these 2 characters are now working together to try to find this like bigger overall picture type thing. I don't know. It was really long, but it was interesting. I don't know if I would recommend it as my first choice for a mystery if someone wanted a book like that, but if someone was looking for a very specific, these things happened in this book, then I would recommend it to them. The next book that I read was The 7-Year Slip. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I'm going to a book signing later this month for her Ashley Poston's new book. And so I wanted to read this one before that signing so that she could sign it for me. And I am so happy that I read it because it was beautiful. I loved the story. This one follows the main character inherits her late aunt's apartment, and this apartment is magical and it sends you 7 years into the past. The aunt's best friend's nephew or something son or nephew or something like that is staying in the apartment for the summer, and so when she goes back in time, he is living in this apartment also. So there's kind of a romance that sparks up between the two of them, and then you see how their story is interconnecting into real life and her real life reality 7 years in the future. And it is just really beautifully written. I loved it. The magical realism was really fascinating to me. There are some quotes that I really liked, especially towards the end. Let me see if I can find them. I did highlight them. Okay, this quote I really enjoyed. It says, "Romance wasn't in chocolate, it was in the gasp of breath as we came up for air. It was in the way he cradled my face, the way I traced my finger over the crescent-shaped birthmark on his collarbone. It was in the way he muttered how beautiful I was, the way it made my heart soar. It was in the way I wanted to know everything about him, his favorite songs, finally guess his favorite color." And then there were a couple quotes at the end that I also really enjoyed. "Sometimes the people you loved left you halfway through the story. Sometimes they left you without a goodbye, and sometimes they stayed around in little ways. In the memory of a musical, in the smell of their perfume, in the sound of the rain, and the itch for adventure. And the yearning for the liminal space between one airport terminal and the next." I really enjoyed that one because it reminded me of one of my grandmas really loved hummingbirds, and so every time I see a hummingbird it makes me think of her, and it just made me think of like little things like that. And then I really liked this one too. It says, "The sadness will last forever. It wasn't a lie. There was sadness and there was despair and there was pain, but there was also laughter and joy and relief. There was never grief without love or love without grief, and I choose to think that my aunt lived because of them, because of all the light and love and joy that she found in the shadows of everything that plagued her. She lived because she loved, and she lived because she was loved, and what a lovely lifetime she gave us." Such a beautiful book. Highly recommend. And then I read Great Big Beautiful Life. This was my book club's pick for one of my other book clubs, and I really enjoyed this one also. It was also 5 stars. I think I found 3 new 5-star reads this month. So, pretty great if you ask me, but I loved the story of this one. It's different than any other Emily Henry stories because it doesn't follow as heavily on the romance side of things. And there's like a subplot going on as well, but I really enjoyed the subplot. I found Margaret's story really enticing and interesting, and I wanted to know what happens, especially as it got further into the story. The very beginnings of her story I wasn't as invested in because it was talking about her grandparents and great-grandparents and things, but once it got into like her actual life, I really enjoyed hearing about her story, and then getting to see the little snippets of romance I also really enjoyed. And I thought it was kind of a realistic take on how romance can spark between two people even when they're rivals, because they're both vying for a chance to write the story of this well-renowned famous person. And again, there were some really great quotes in here as well. I'll just tell you my favorite one at the very end. "I find myself thinking that maybe every bit of heartbreak in life can be rearranged and used for something beautiful. That it doesn't really matter whether I choose this path or if I was born onto it, as long as I stop and appreciate the path itself." I definitely, if you are a fan of Emily Henry, I would definitely recommend this one. And if you also are a fan of like Taylor Jenkins Reid, I would recommend this one because I feel like it felt really similar to a TJR book. Especially, I was getting reminiscence of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So if you liked The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I would give this one a chance, or vice versa. If you've read this one and you really liked it, but you haven't read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid yet, I would highly recommend that book also. And then I read The Favorites by Elaine Fargo. Again, this was the 3rd 5-star read that I found this month. I loved this book. I listened to the audiobook of it. Highly recommend the audio because there are chapters that are like interview style, and when they're doing the interview style, each person they're interviewing is a different voice actor, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and it was just a beautiful story. If you liked Daisy Jones and the Six, which I love Daisy Jones and the Six, you'd probably really like this one because it follows two really well-known Olympic figure skaters and kind of their story of how they began, but also their fallout and just everything that happens in between. And it was so intriguing. I could not stop listening to it because I needed to know what happened next throughout the entire story. I ate this up. I immediately went and bought a physical copy. As soon as I could find a physical copy after I finished listening to it, I immediately purchased it because I knew that I wanted it for my shelves because it was just a favorite and I could see myself rereading it, but I just adored it. Highly recommend this one. It was so good. And if you like audiobooks, I would definitely recommend the audiobook. Or even if you're new to audiobooks and you never really tried an audiobook, this would be a good one to try out for the first time. And then I read something on my Kindle, and it was The Answer Is No by Frederick Bachman. It was a short story. I really enjoyed it. It was 80-ish pages or something like that, but I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was really interesting. It follows this guy who lives in an apartment complex, and this bunch of people start just leaving a bunch of trash or things that they don't want to keep on this corner, and he's trying to live this like super happy life, but then the management people at the apartment somehow make him the person in charge of all this trash and figuring out who's dumping the trash there and stuff. It's just, it was interesting. It wasn't my favorite Frederick Bachman read, but again, it was only a short story, so can't really judge it too harshly because it was only 80 pages and there's only so much you can tell in a story in 80 pages. And then I listened to The God of the Woods. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really interesting. It takes place at a summer camp, and the people who own this summer camp also have this big like mansion style house somewhere on the grounds where this camp is taking place. One of the campers goes missing, and the person that goes missing happens to be the daughter of the family that owns this campgrounds. You're following that story, but then it also goes back in time to like 10 years prior, I think. I don't know exactly, like 15 years prior, somewhere around there. This family that owns the campgrounds had a son who also goes missing on the same campgrounds. And so you're following the 2 stories, kind of. There was a lot of characters to remember, but I really enjoyed it. I've heard that this one people didn't like as much because it's not super mystery heavy, but I thought it was. Like, I still saw the literary fiction elements to it, but I still felt like it was a mystery that you were trying to figure out. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess. I don't know. And then I got another early copy of a book called The Other Side of Now. And I really enjoyed this one as well. I gave it a 4.5 star. So it was almost a 5 star, but not quite. I thought the story for this one was really enticing and interesting and fun. It was giving almost like Freaky Friday kind of vibes. Basically, there is the main character at the beginning. Her and her best friend at this fair see a palm reader, and they go to the palm reader, and there's a line on her hand where the person was like, you have 2 lines here. Most people only have 1. Your story, like, you have 2 different lives. And so you get that information right at the beginning, but then it fast forwards 10 years, and the main character is now an actress on a TV show, and she is not happy with her life anymore, so she decides to book a last minute vacation. She leaves, like literally books it that night, leaves that next morning to some random small little town that she wanted to go to for college but didn't end up going to for college. And when she gets there, she realizes that a lot of these people are calling her by her actual name and her like nickname, childhood nickname that she hasn't gone by in years. In her persona as this actress, she actually uses a different fake name. So she's surprised that these people know her actual name, and they even mention her best friend, who she, for circumstances that I don't want to spoil, hasn't seen her best friend in like 10 years. And so she's really confused, but then turns out that this is where that palm reader said she has two different lives. This is her other life that she would have had if she chose a different path type thing. It came out June 3rd, so it is out now for you to go and give it a read, and I would definitely recommend because it was really fun. And then I read From Here to the Great Unknown. This is a memoir written by Elvis Presley's daughter and granddaughter. The granddaughter, if you didn't know, is Riley Keough, and she starred in Daisy Jones and the Six. She was Daisy Jones. So that's how I found her. That's how I heard of her. And then I saw that she finished writing the memoir that her mom had started before her mom passed away. And she finished writing it and published it after her mom passed away. And I really enjoyed it. For those that don't know, I don't rate nonfiction, specifically memoirs, because I just feel weird putting a star rating onto someone's life story. So I don't give them ratings, but I really recommend it. I enjoyed it a lot. I would highly recommend the audiobook. It was a really interesting read, and I don't know much about Elvis. I don't really listen to his music much or anything like that, and so I didn't really know much about their family's history and story, so it was really interesting getting to learn about all of that. So I would definitely recommend the audiobook for it. And then the last book that I read in May was Mother of Death and Dawn. I am so sad that I did not buy the OG covers of this series before now, because now you can no longer buy the OG covers because they are getting this series trilogy is getting traditionally published, and they're completely changing the covers. I do not like the new covers. I want the old covers. But now you can't buy the old covers. So I don't know if I'll ever own them, but I really enjoyed this trilogy, and I'm happy that I have finally finished it because I read the second book like 8 months ago. So I needed to do a little recap to remind myself about what happened, but I read it on my Kindle. They're on Kindle Unlimited, and it is a really fun fantasy series. I was really intrigued and wanted to know how the story was going to wrap up, how the war was going to wrap up, and just everything that was going on, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, which I think is similar to what I gave the other 2 as well. Let me double check. I gave 3.75 to the first one and then 4 stars to the second one. So really enjoyed the series overall. That is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!